Kia ora, good evening. Welcome to the Eye in the Sky Show podcast. So tonight, I'm going to be talking about a well-known case of demonic possession with a guy called Bill Vale, who was a robotics engineer for NASA, who in 2002 started experiencing what he believed to be demonic possession. But if you know my work and you know my studies into the Ascension sciences and quantum magnetics and biorhythmics and all the work that I put up on my social media, which is basically I used my YouTube and my Instagram and Twitter and all that to be my giant notebook. I use my LinkedIn to do my write-ups and that to draw attention to my podcast. I was originally looking for investors, which is why I had my LinkedIn. My business partner and I, the person I was going to go into business with had suggested I set up a LinkedIn page to look for investors, but I actually decided I don't really need investors. I can do the podcast and that myself. And then when I get my boys, I can go out and do my shows by myself. I recorded everything with my training, with my time jumps and all that, when I was training to master my gift and master quantum magnetics and time jumping and all that. I used my phone, and a friend of mine showed me how to do this properly with, the right kind of affordable sound and lighting equipment, that when my boys hit the road with me when we go out and make these shows, they've agreed they'll just help me do it, and we'll just do it ourselves. So I don't actually need investors, other than I'm not really going to need money for anything other than like gas and hotel, and when we want to go and investigate in other countries. So I was using my LinkedIn for that, but now I just use it to document everything and to advertise my podcast, and that should anyone be interested in wanting to join us or sponsor us, or just to go to the videos and that and watch them so that they can learn. I've put everything out there. I document everything. There's two reasons for that. First is because I was documenting my science as I was developing it, so that I would have witnesses to the supernatural events that were starting to unfold within me as I was learning to master quantum magnetics and develop biorhythmic engineering. And also I document everything for people who are ascending or in the underworld or going through paranormal and supernatural events that they don't understand, so that they can see an honest, truthful, scientific perspective that isn't conjecture or supposition, or like, oh, it could be this or it could be that. Like, I give definitive answers. It's cutting edge. There's no one, you have to step outside the matrix to know what it is that I'm talking about. Where everything I talk about, once you sit down and listen to what I'm talking about, makes perfect sense. And because of that, I've helped a lot of people over the course of my lifetime, from when I was doing unsolved mysteries and unsolved murders as a child with my dad, right through to now when I had my radio show in Chicago, and the podcast that I bring to you now that I understand everything and it is all there, the formula has been written, so to speak. I'm now comfortable enough to be able to bring it all to you, and know what I'm talking about without having to scratch my head and say, well, I don't know. Because I think, it's like Einstein says, if you have to explain your work to if you can't explain your work to a 6-year-old, you don't understand your work. So, I like to make sure that I can explain the paranormal and the supernatural, and especially ascensions as well, to everyone of every age, from every religion and every faith, in a way and a language that they understand it, so that nobody walks away from me scratching their heads, still not understanding, the thing that goes bump in the night in their bedroom. So I've written children's books that help children from, as young as 2 and 3 understand what's going on, right up to people to 100, with like Andre's Dragon and that sci-fi fantasy fairy tales and all that. Like, I've written books to help children and people with imaginations understand, the ascension process and the different aspects of the paranormal and supernatural that children and young people experience. And then, of course, I have my podcasts and my write-ups and that on my social media and my YouTube channel to explain it to people who want to listen and watch and learn the experience as I was developing it, you know. So today, I have already touched on the subject in my LinkedIn, and I put it up on Twitter as well. I'll put links in the description box below so you can go to my LinkedIn and my Twitter to see the proper write-up of it. Because I'm only going to touch briefly in this video because I'm trying not to, you know, spend too long on these podcasts because I want people to be able to lay in bed at night and put this on and have a think about, you know, what it is they're experiencing. And my dream is I really want to do late night talkback radio. I've been saying it for years. When I had my radio show in Chicago, I was primetime, which was an honour. No one had ever been given the primetime spot that was a newbie before, and I was given the primetime spot, but I always said that I felt that I was better for late night talkback radio, where people could lay in bed or, you know, sit with a cuppy and their feet up and just listen to me talking about the paranormal and the supernatural. Everyone is more comfortable. I don't know why, but everyone seems to be more comfortable listening to this stuff and talking about this stuff when it's nighttime. You know, maybe because everything's calmer. Um, so today we are going to be talking about Bill Vale and his perceived demonic possession. But in my scientific terms, I call it Ascension Psychosis. So if you don't know the story about Bill, he was a former NASA robotics engineer who in 2002 experienced the end of his marriage. It apparently came out of the blue. It was quite a shock. This is important to know this. And he decided to move back to Texas to be with his family and start his life all over again. He got a job with his brother working for the water company, and he got a phone call one day to say that he needed to go to this house at 5 o'clock, and he had to be there at 5 o'clock on the dot. So he gets to the house, he knocks on the door, he hears a woman yelling, "Get out, get out, get out." He thinks she's in trouble. He enters the house to see if she's okay. He goes into the living room and he sees three men kneeling on the floor. And this woman, is walking around with a book in her hand saying, "Get out, get out, get out, get out." And then she points at him, and then from that point on, everything changes. Now, the belief is, the popular consensus is that she called him to the house at 5 o'clock, so because she knew that would be when she'd be driving the demons out of the souls of the men that were kneeling on the floor and transferring them over to Bob. Because then when he got home after that, like, everything changed for him, and you know, now his story has become famous. He was in Paranormal Witness, and he's been interviewed by a lot of people, and he's had paranormal investigators come into his home, and you know, all that sort of thing, and he's still dealing with the issue today. So basically, what I'm here to say is that firstly, you cannot put a curse on someone who doesn't accept the curse. You cannot curse innocent people. It goes against the laws of the universe. You would be incurring a lot of karmic debt for yourself and your future generations if you forced the will of a curse on an innocent person who didn't willingly accept to take that offering. You know, like some people might say, "Give it to me because I know how to get rid of it." Do you know what I mean? There are plenty of people out there that know how to get rid of curses or perceived curses, and they know how to transform the energy and transmute it into positive energy. Like I do that. I have been given cursed items where I then transmute the energy and, you know, release the negative energy off the item, and have been able to dispose of it for the people, and that sort of thing. But you cannot force someone's psychosis on somebody else. Like, it's not possible. There are barriers in place, like your biomagnetic frequency for a start doesn't let anything in that doesn't match the vibration. So you can't let anything in your personal bubble that isn't of the same frequency. Otherwise it's like trying to blow a bubble at a glass. like it has to be of the same frequency in order for it to come in to that, into your biomagnetic atmosphere. So it's perceived. Because they believed it, it became so. But you have to understand, as well, as I keep saying, that the devil has to announce himself before his arrival. So he has to knock on the door, and you have to invite him in before he's allowed to take possession of the house. If you imagine your soul is the house, he can't just walk in and take possession of the house. He has to knock, and you have to invite him in order for him to take possession of the house. So basically, what happened was, when Bill got home that night, he started seeing a black shape running across the floor, and then he started experiencing violent bed shaking. The bed was shaking, and then his internet went out, and he was hearing noises, and he saw a hand come up from the bed, and when his internet went down, he rang the internet company, and they said, yep, your internet's gone down. And then while he was put on hold, he heard a voice come across, like a demonic sounding growling voice come across the phone, which the man on the other side heard. And, so he was experiencing all these things, these incredible thuds in the house. Things were falling out of the wardrobes of his bedroom. He was terrified. He was absolutely terrified. And he didn't know what on earth was going on. And he was too scared to tell anyone. And then when he finally did tell his brother and his sister-in-law, I believe, about, the boxes flying off the shelf in the wardrobe and all that sort of thing, they eventually got paranormal investigators in, and this is when they started, they thought he thought he'd recorded a voice, but when they played it back, they didn't hear anything. He was having a lot of trouble with electronic equipment playing up, and this is where I come in to explain what it is that was actually going on. Ascension psychosis. The first thing you have to understand is that he is a very, very highly intellectual man. He is a creative empath. I always say that your creative empathic minds, I call it, the people with high IQs. The people that usually are diagnosed with things like autism and ADHD, because their IQs are so high, or they resonate on such a high frequency that the normal, average, everyday person just doesn't understand them. They're just not on the same literal wavelength, because they function at such a high brain frequency. Like they're not being able to keep still, and the rocking and the constant twitching, and that it's nervous energy. Is because they're understimulated. Like creatively and psychologically, they're understimulated, and so the body reacts to it. They're like live wires. They need to direct their energy somewhere, and when they're told to sit down and be normal and shut up and take medication, and that, it subdues it all, and it just makes it worse. Which is why I wanted to have my school, because I know how to deal with creative empathic children. I know how their minds work. So I wanted to have the money to build a school to give them all those creative outlets where they could have the freedom to express themselves creatively without hindrance or fear of being judged by others. Because the trouble that we have with the creative empath is that they're born being judged, because they're different to everybody else. Everybody, they treat them like they're misfits and nerds and weirdos and, social outcasts, and that, when in actual fact it's everybody else that is the misfit. It's like having the Hope Diamond next to a piece of coal, even though they're both the same thing. Diamonds is compressed coal. They all came from the same thing. They're all the same source, but one is more precious than the other. The creative empath is the Hope Diamond, and everybody else is a lump of coal. But because coal is more popular, there's more coal on the earth. It's like the popular consensus doesn't necessarily make it the right consensus. You're talking about the Hope Diamond, it's a rare diamond. Creative empaths are rare minds. They work on a frequency that is so high vibing. These are the people that build the rocket ships that get us into space. These are the people that find the cures for cancers, and build, cars that run on chip fat, and, like the people that write the novels that people are still reading 200 years later because they make such an impact on people's lives. Your Mozarts and the works of art that end up being worth millions of pounds in the future, and that, off the back of somebody who was barely able to afford candles and bread, you know. So Bill's a creative empath. He worked for NASA. He's a robotic engineer. His mind was on a frequency unlike any other person, probably in his life, other than the people who worked at NASA in the same fields as him. So a highly tuned, we can be highly strung, vessel of creativity and high functioning brain waves coming off this man. It's said that he had been like it his whole life. He was a very serious man, and he just loved his work, and he loved learning, and loved getting his degrees, and just loved doing what he did. And then when his marriage came about, suddenly ending, it threw him into, whether he knew it or not, depression. It happened so suddenly with him that the shock of it all completely shut his biomagnetic rhythm down. So that's why he decided to leave his job and move location, and try and start again, and just take a job with his brother at the water company, because his biomagnetic system just completely shut down. He had to change his surroundings in order to try and heal his surroundings, because what he was around was affecting him so deeply. The only way he felt that he could try and fix what had suddenly broken in his life was to change locations and try and start again. But then what actually happened was, when that woman did that exorcism, she didn't cast the demon onto him. She invoked his demon out of him. Whether people want to admit it or not, that's exactly what she did. She triggered his inner primal scream. So his pain and his grief from his marriage ending, leaving his job, having to give up his whole life to try and start again, just the shock of everything that was going on in his life, shut everything down within him. And because he, being an intellectual person, he would have experienced that. And he would have gone home, he would have been thinking about what happened that day, and by him thinking about it and trying to figure out what it was he witnessed, he triggered his inner demons to come out. She kind of like pulled the trigger, and he got hit by the bullet, and then started being expected to then pick the bullet out of his wound and try and heal that wound. Like people can say, but what about how he experienced the temperature dropping in the room and everything went cold? Well, when you're in shock, how your blood pressure can rise and you get hot. When you're in deep concentration, they were all sitting there concentrating, listening for noises and things like that. When you're in deep concentration, you can lower your blood pressure and change the temperature in your biomagnetic ionosphere. Your biomagnetic parameter will drop in temperatures because your blood pressure drops. It drops the temperature in the room around you, and because the room was filled with a couple of intellectual people with him who were sitting and concentrating, waiting for something to happen, it's not like a mass hallucination, but it's like a chorus of high functioning brains waiting for something to happen, manifested a drop in the temperature in the atmosphere, because with sitting in the silence and concentrating and trying to pay attention to what was going on, they would have lowered their blood pressure, which would have lowered the sensations that their skin and that would have been feeling in the room around them, which would then have lowered the temperature in the room. You'll also notice as well that every time he experiences something, like with the when he sees the hand coming up from under the bed, when he sees the demonic shadow with the big tooth, walking in front of him and grunts, and when he hears the thuds hitting the house, and when the bed starts shaking violently, he's in bed. And this is because people don't realize that when we're getting ready to go to bed, our body is already starting to shut down long before we actually go into sleep mode. Which is why a lot of people will experience activity just before they go to bed. They might hear clicking and footsteps, and feel again the temperature in the room drop, and then when they go to sleep, or they're starting to go to sleep, they'll hear things in their room, and they might see someone standing beside their bed, and they're utterly convinced. They will be utterly convinced they are wide awake. They'll be utterly convinced they're wide awake, but they're not actually awake. It's like sleepwalking. You can be wide awake and functioning perfectly normal, but your conscious mind isn't even in the same, I call it docking. I put a video up explaining about sleep paralysis and sleepwalking, and that I can put a link in the description box below. But basically, like your spirit or your conscious mind, when it's starting to shut down to go into sleep mode, when your melatonin in your brain is starting to recognize that the sun's gone down, and it's starting to shut down all the chemicals in your body so that you can prepare to go into hibernation mode, which is what sleeping is. Our bodies need the rest, so we trigger like a nightly hibernation mode in order to recharge our batteries, and so that our conscious mind can go off and be with ancestors, and float about the universe, and exist in the atomic frequency, and send you psychoanalysis in the form of dreams, and show you your future, and give you deja vu in your dreams, and all that sort of thing. We don't stop just because we go to sleep. Our conscious mind is there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from the second the universe was created until long after it's gone, sort of thing. Our conscious mind is what creates the universe. So he manifested all of this. This is his primal scream. By him not dealing with his grief, by him not dealing with the shock of everything and the massive upheaval and change in his life, when he went into that room and she pointed at him, whether she intended to do it or not, people are saying that she passed the demons on to him, but if she did, then that's coming back on her, because it wouldn't have affected him like that. They're not allowed. It's not possible. Innocent people are protected by black magic. Like I said, it's like trying to blow a bubble at a glass. It can't penetrate. It's not allowed to. It goes against the laws of the universe. You would have to deal with the wrath of your gods, and Satan. Satan protects the innocent and punishes the sinners. You would have to be dealing with all those kind of entities for breaking the laws of the universe, going against the laws of the universe. If you try to pass on a curse or like a demonic attachment to an innocent person, it's not allowed. It's like trying to pass an orange through the wheel of a car. Like it's like, you know what I'm trying to say? Like if the bubble hits the glass, it's going to burst. Well, it's the same with negative energy. If it comes near something that's pure, the negative energy bursts and gets dispelled, gets displaced. The energy then has to go off into other things, which is why a lot of the time people think that their clocks and furniture and that get to possessed, because like someone was murdered in the room, and that fear and the shock then gets transmuted and soaked up by everything else in the room, and then people think that the clock or the bed was possessed, but it's just that it's absorbed the shock of the negative energy from the murder that took place in that room. So if you imagine taking the rubber tire of a car and trying to pass an orange through it, it's just going to squash against it and turn into juice and mush. Well, that's what happens when people try to do black magic or pass demonic entities onto innocent people. Like, it just turns to mush. It can't go anywhere. But what she did do is that by him then having to think about what he'd just witnessed, he triggered that reaction. In the recesses of his mind, he would have thought while she was doing an exorcism, they must have been possessed. And by him thinking that, the second he did that, it's like, boom, it's exactly what happened to him, because that's what his brain knew. So, I think therefore I am, you manifest what you create. So that's what happened to him. Basically, when he heard the voices on the recordings, it has been proven, we can throw our voices. That's been scientifically proven. We have been able to play back the recordings of people who made pottery clay pots 5,000 years ago. And when they played the pottery back through a laser, you could actually hear them talking and singing and things like that. So, it is possible to throw your voice. It's like I said, his primal scream, the voices he heard was him. Because he was the only one hearing it. It was him. It's basically like his wounded inner child, his wounded inner self screaming out for help. But because you're talking about, because he's in the underworld, because you're dealing with psychological issues, like Ascension psychosis, you imagine these things and you create them. You create them because you imagine them. You imagine them because you create them. But what's not being done in any of these cases where I have watched all these paranormal investigations with all these, people that come in with their so-called scientific equipment and that, nobody ever deals with the reason why he's experiencing it, the reason why they're going through it. And that's my job. That's what I do. I come in and I sit down with the people experiencing Ascension psychosis, and then I get to the root of the problem, and then dealing with their past lives, their childhood traumas, the things that really hurt them. Like, they trust me with their deepest, darkest, most painful secrets. They come to me and I sit down with them and I get to the root of the problem. Because I'm a Scorpio, we get to the deepest level. We are the deepest water sign because we get to the underbelly. Like Pisces, they deal with, the social butterfly. They flit about. They're the surface water sign. They are the ones that, will cook and clean and, sit and have a chat and a gossip and a natter and, talk jovial things. They're not really people that, they want to make sure everyone's okay and taken care of, but they keep conversations light and jovial. They don't like to deal with the darker stuff because they're usually quite highly emotional. But then you have Cancer, who, like I said, they are the ones that people go to for their emotional problems because they like to clean up people's messes. If someone comes to a Cancer with a problem, they like to help them, give them suggestions on how to feel better, and give them the links to go to that website, or recommend a recipe for a diet that's going to help them feel better within themselves. And that's Cancer. Whereas a Scorpio, we just go straight in there with the, so what happened to you as a kid? Like, like we deal with the underbelly stuff. We deal with the underworld side of it because we're not afraid to go there. We get straight to the root of the problem. We like to find everything that is hidden in the corners of your psychological mind so that we can give it a good clean out and then help you start again, because we are the sign of birth and death and regeneration. It's what we do. It's just that I've turned it into a job and a science, where now I want to turn it into shows and podcasts where I can tell you all what it is so that you can understand it, because it's terrifying for people. And it's not fear from a scientific perspective. It's not fear that it's been classed as paranormal when it's not. It's supernatural, because you're talking about people who are using the power of their mind to conjure up the demons with inside their wounded inner child. That is supernatural. That's not paranormal. They're two completely different things. People need to understand there is a fundamental difference between the paranormal and the supernatural. And this is what I am all about, because especially if you know my story with what happened with me last year, I was put in a place where these people who were diagnosed with things like schizophrenia and psychosis and ADHD and borderline personality disorder and all that, and I worked with them, and I use oh god, this is terrible. I use them as my test subjects. I've got notepad after notepad after notepad, and on my Instagram, of all the notes and documents that I was taking with the work that I was doing with the women in that hospital, because I was getting rid of the problems that they were experiencing in their room. As soon as I got wind of the fact that these women were talking about their paranormal activity and being too scared to go to sleep because they were hearing voices and that, I came in with my little bass core, biorhythmic field generator, my Neanderthalic version, my original version of my BFG, and I was going into the rooms and clearing all the energy, and I was doing the hallways and the doorways and everything. I didn't care what the hospital thought. They were even giving me extra medication because of the fact that I was using my indigenous gift and my science to help these women sleep better at night, because they were too scared to go to sleep, and then they were being forced to take sleep medication because they would get checked up on every hour, and if they were still awake by like 2-3 o'clock, they were being forced to take sleep medication. And these poor women in the morning would be standing getting their breakfast, like physically shaking, because they had so many drugs in their system they couldn't even function as human beings. So then I was coming along with my BFG, and I was cleansing their rooms and cleansing their doorways, and I was walking up and down those hallways doing cleansings using my BFG, and everything changed. There used to be big fist fights and arguments in that place, and when I did that cleansing and clearing, like, everything changed. And then I had women coming up to me crying and hugging me and saying, "Oh my God, I slept for the first time last night," or, "I've been here for X amount of days and I've been hearing noises and now it's all gone." And, people, they were getting their doses lowered. They were being sent home. Because I would sit down and I would tell them what was going on with them. I would do palm readings and look at the lines in their wrist, and delve up the most important past lives that they were needing to look at, so that they could help heal themselves in this life and help deal with their current situations, and their current diagnoses and all that. And it was making huge differences in the way that they were from when they came in to when they left. It was just incredible. Like, I completely understand why I had to go in there, because that place ended up becoming the basis of biorhythmic engineering for me. I studied the biorhythmics in order to help myself, help my body heal from the anaphylaxis from having to take the medication. But through that, through working on the science and helping these women, it helped mold what is now going to be the biorhythmic field generator. And when I take it out to do investigations and look at cases and do these shows with my boys, and I come across people like come across people like Bill Vale, I can use my technology and I can use my science to sit down and, my understanding of Ascension Psychosis and the Ascension sciences, and I can sit down and fix him. If I could sit down with Bill and have a talk with him and show him what to do in order to release that wounded inner child and to give that wounded inner child a voice, and to deal with the grief of the shock of his marriage and, the upheaval that he experienced with his life, and that I can guarantee you that all the stuff that he's still experiencing today would be gone. The boxes falling down, that's just classic poltergeist. As we know, that's mind bullets, that's kinetic energy. His stress and everything comes firing off the brain as like mind bullets. So I can sit down, and I think he would appreciate it, because being a robotic engineer, he's of a scientific mind. And I know that when he was trying to research all of this stuff, he was looking for people who were able to use a scientific perspective on what he was dealing with. And even though people step forward, nobody has been able to actually cure him, to stop it. But again, this is where I come in. So if I could ever meet him, if I could ever talk to him, I would sit down with him and use what I know, and I know he would understand it all, and I know he would appreciate it. He would probably even be able to help me build the BFG. So, I think that great minds think alike. And I think that when I came along and sat down and spoke to him and told him what was actually going on and what he could do to deal with it, I think not only would it fix his problem, but it would give him a better understanding of the fact that he's going through an ascension. When you're thrown into the underworld, it is with the expectation that you're going to be pulled out of it and come out of it a better person. The trouble is, his mind has been stuck where it is because nobody has been there to reach their hand out and pull him out of that dark tunnel. He's still stuck in the underworld. He's still stuck in that tunnel. He's getting glimpses of, all the other 6 stages of his ascension process, but he's still stuck in the underworld because nobody has been able to pull him out of it yet. But that's my job. I'm a gatekeeper. I help people with their ascensions. And I really, really hope to God one day that I get to talk to him, because then I can reach my hand out to him and pull him out of the dark underworld tunnel that he is currently stuck in. And then I think we would all see a different Bill. So that is the story of Bill Vale and his demonic possession. I'm going to put a link in the description box below of the Mr. Ballen video where he does a beautiful take of, Bill's story. I'm also going to put links in for my LinkedIn and Twitter where I talk about Ascension Psychosis, aka demonic possession. And also a link where Bill has been interviewed by some paranormal investigator or something like that. Otherwise, there's plenty of stuff about him on the internet and YouTube and that. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I'll leave the email in the description box below. And this is the start of it. This is the start of my podcast now. I'm so excited. I spend every day working on material, putting all my little cases and case notes and that together. I've got so many scraps of paper and notebooks in there all over the place in like various rooms in this flat for, when I'm able to actually go out on the road and, for when I'm just sitting here in my room with my phone uploading these videos. So, like I said, I'm going to be covering everything from paranormal activity, unsolved mysteries, supernatural stuff, like all of it, urban legends, myths, mythology, the whole kit and caboodle. But this is the birth of it now. So enjoy this podcast, and if you have any questions, like I said, feel free to message me, and I will see you next time. In the meantime, have a good sleep, hold your head up high, and know that you are loved. Ka kite anō. Mwah.